Greetings, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Way of the Showman, where we, as always, view the world through the lens of showmanship. I am Captain Frodo, and together with Jay Gilligan as your guest host today, we will guide you along this leg of the way. We are back here with the third and final episode of the Helsinki Conversations, where me and Jay delve deeply into many topics, as you might have heard in the previous two episodes. And tonight, or today, or this morning, whenever this episode might find you, Jay and I finish off talking about authenticity and being yourself, which is where we left it hanging last time. Jay's mind blown by the comments of an excited French juggler after watching his show, and today we start off there, and then very quickly Jay actually starts bending the conversation in onto me, and this is probably the most kind of in-depth exploration of an aspect of my process, my artistic process, of how I develop work and how I translate everything that I read and how I see it into ways that it connects to my work. It's a kind of translation, so that's a key kind of word. Another thing which I just watched, John Vervaeke started a new series called Beyond Socrates, and there he said in the end, when he was talking about us needing to do some study on Socrates or whatever, the people who are watching the show, said, read these things as if you need to tell someone about it. And I realized I'd never thought of it quite like that, but I do that all the time. When I'm reading, I might be keeping you in mind. Maybe I have to tell you about this thing that I'm reading. So I'm trying to synthesize the stuff out and put it in my head in ways so that I can express it to you or to Jay or to anyone else that might be interested. So this is another kind of key thing which I don't mention in the conversation about my artistic process, which we're about to jump into now. But I thought it could be a good starting point. So, without further ado, let's jump straight back into the conversation.
I really wish when I was 8 or 9 or 10 or 16 or 18 or whatever, that guy in France who yelled at me, how cool would that have been if they were like, hey, you can't just juggle, you also have to be yourself. Man, that would have changed my life.
Yeah.
Would have changed my life. So I want to hear a couple.
You got to do it authentically. You got to do it as yourself. Yeah, that's a good kind of thing. But that's like that's as helpful or whatever as unpacked as know thyself.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it's like it said in the Oracle of Delphi, and you go in, and it's like you need to know yourself. But that is such an enormous kind of question because it keeps going on. And whenever you think or you say or you express or you think you've grasped anything of yourself, it is not all of it. We talked about this as well.
Yeah.
And all the people who see you, they see you differently. Your parents see you differently. That's why when you come home, if you have a bad relationship, then they don't see all of you. There's aspects of me that only my wife knows, and there's aspects of me that when I am with my family, and then when I'm with you and they are away and we're eating donuts and talking endlessly, then that's also another person, which is not quite the same person because you allow me to be myself in another way.
Yeah.
Just like they do. And so that's that is, so you can be completely authentic but do many different things. And that's why I talk about in the dance of truth with clowns and truth or whatever, and one of the episodes that I've done, I talk about this, that truth and authenticity is something which happens. It's not something which is. So you can watch a performance of something, and I can present something, maybe as Indiana Jones, and you can feel it somehow authentic.
Sure.
I don't know what exactly that would be, but in that moment between him and the others, through the wink, maybe he didn't do anything other than the juggling, but like whatever that thing was, that could be felt like this was a real genuine thing, and I connected to all of it. Probably it didn't, but...
No, I get you. Yeah,
and then you can go another place, and then you be with your friends, and then you feel completely authentic in another way, and then you go somewhere else and you feel... But all those three things don't even necessarily add up, so you couldn't do them all in the same show. Because when you're in the show, you got to be in a consistent throughout your performance or whatever. So maybe something in there.
That's cool. Do you have energy for a bonus question?
Oh yeah.
Yeah? Is it okay?
Yeah.
Because it comes from what you were just saying. So I observed something about you and how you practice and make your work. You seem to have in your, talking about you're saying we can be authentic in different ways and with different people, different contexts, and with your family and now with me and, with your parents and like this, and different sides of yourself can come out in different ways. I've noticed, like, when I'm hanging out with you or when I'm talking to you a lot, you're always reading lots of books. You're always watching lots of, you seem to know lots of movies. You watch lots of TV shows in the best of ways. Like, you kind of keep up on current things, but old things. But what I find, what I wanted to ask you about is you also always, at least it seems to me from the outside, you find a way to connect these things into your work and into your process. And I know we talked about this a little bit yesterday in terms of character of like, man, Frodo is just so crazy. And then it's like, I'd actually rather go home and read a book, like I'm not going to go out and do...
It's actually a bit boring. Yeah.
Like, yeah, you go to your tennis racket act and people go, oh, I'm going to go party with that guy. And you're just like, I want to go home and like write my book. Like you've written books, man. Like, so that's another side of yourself. But what I've noticed that's cool, or what I find maybe not surprising, but I can't really name too many other people I know that are able to connect their process of their work with kind of their holistic, like, curiosity about the world. I mean, can you speak to anything concretely about, or consciously about, like, I mean, maybe it's just intrinsically who you are, but like, how, do you have any methods? Do you have any sort of systems or techniques or tricks of like, oh man, I was reading this book about poetry, or I was reading this book about, thermodynamics, and then I'm writing this show about dinosaurs. And and when I talk to you, those things aren't just completely disparate.
No, they're all connected.
You unify things. And yeah, can you speak a little bit about that?
I was wondering about that because a guy just contacted me lately and he'd listened to my podcasts and gone like, how can I get into some of this? And gone, I need to read some, I need to brush up on some, need to read beginner's philosophy, I need to get into, where do I start with poetry, and how do I do? And anyways, that made me sort of think, and I listed off a bunch of books that I thought this could be a good place to start. But then I also thought maybe I should do an episode or a couple of episodes about this way that I read books and how I read essays and how I read. So, like, I have a book here. Let's show you just because it's lying right here.
Yeah.
And I call it active reading. Okay. I think of it as active reading. It's that I'm not just reading the book and just trying to work out what this guy is telling me. I'm doing that. Trying to work out what this guy... This is a book on curiosity.
Okay.
But it's also about education and about connecting, and it's about depth. Depth learning in the information society, or whatever, in information time, age of information.
And did you pick this book because it personally interested you, or because you were working on a project that this is relevant to?
It also talks about play. It has a section here as a chapter specifically on play.
Gotcha.
And I heard my sister or my mother found an article on play, because I'm writing about play at the moment.
Gotcha.
For the final episodes of this what I think of as season 2, which has gone on for like flipping 40 episodes. So it's just the podcasts are just coming out. But I'm thinking of as closing this idea of the way of the showman, this and play. So I heard an interview with somebody about play, went on to a podcast because I listened to an interview with that guy who had written it together with a play from a neurological point of view, was that book. And it was very interesting. But on that same podcast that I then found, a Norwegian podcast that I didn't know, there was an interview with this guy on a book that he had written called Curiosity. And then I listened to that because I sort of know who this is. I read another book by this guy before, Marcus Lindholm. And I like what he has to say, but I haven't been completely grabbed by it. And then I heard him speak, and I went, "Oh, this is very interesting." And then I bought the book. Anyway, we don't need.
So
to
it's
talk
relevant.
about
I mean,
this
it's
book.
connected to some work you're doing.
Connected to some work that I'm doing. So then, when I am reading this, then I underline all the time. So. But
you have a highlighter.
So I have a highlighter, so I read with a highlighter and a pen.
Yeah.
And when I'm going through here, every time when I'm reading a book, I'm also thinking about aspects of all the work that I've done. My young adult novels about Veronica Quirk who loses a leg. That's in there. So all of a sudden some sentences or something is going on in here that connects to, and I have my app on my phone where I go in and write a note there. But then in the... Then he talks about something in here, and I've written a note here, like unknown destination. The activity co-creates the destination. Like you set out and you don't quite know where you're going. And then, so this is a synthesis of what he said, but it's also what it sprung
Triggered
out and I'm
you.
putting in. And I'm writing the notes in English, because this is the language that I'm writing in, but I'm reading the book in Norwegian. So I'm taking the idea and translating it into something going, I like this idea, because the creative process is not just that unknown destination. The activity that you do co-creates the destination. So you don't know where it starts out, but you're going it out. So anyway, in the process when I'm reading, and I'm underlining things I'm reading it and I'm going, this is important to me. So I'm underlining that, and I underline it with it skinny or with wide if it's important.
Right.
I underline it with the pen as well if it is. And when I fold the book down, so it makes a dog ear here.
Yeah, you turn the corner of the page. Yeah.
Yes, I turn the corner of the page.
Yeah.
When I do that, it means there is something on this page which is directly related to what I'm writing or some project that I do. So when I go back to this book later, I can now go in and I go... As I'm finishing my essay or whatever, going, what was this here? Okay, toys as garbage is the headline here.
Yeah.
And I have, and then I've written a long note I can see here, and there's a bunch of writing right at the very beginning. So something here, it's got to do with Descartes and his separation between spirit and matter, and between object and meaning. And I've written a note here, so something in here, if I am reading, or if I'm stuck, or if I'm needing something, then I go, what was that in that book? Because I usually remember there was something in there that he made some great points about plastic toys or whatever. And I can go in, and now I know that thing that I have underlined, written a note about, and gone, this is related to that. Then I can go back and I can... But the thing about it is that I take myself and all my creative projects with me into the reading that I'm doing. So when I'm actively reading...
Like any reading.
Any reading. Essays, I'm watching something on YouTube, I'm watching a movie, I'm watching a thing, and I'm keeping this in there. And when I'm by myself and I'm watching a German movie here about some Nazi stuff or whatever, just yesterday, and then I pause the movie and I write some notes because it just something triggered in me, and I have 100 notes on my phone, and you search it and it comes up, and I go in and you can type something there, so that when I'm going to work on that project, that idea lies in there. So I'm always watching it not as that I'm just passively sitting here and taking in what they are giving me. I always have it, like what I talk about, how you have the showman and the audience, and the show is something that happens in between those two, in the active, they're watching you, they're participating in it. And I do that when I watch YouTube. When I'm listening to it, I pause it, take notes, go, that triggers me in writing a poem. I stop and I write down some lines that I think, this is a really interesting thing. Sometimes I don't do it. Sometimes I sit down in the morning and I go, I'm going to finally get to read some Ian McGilchrist's 1,500-page book. Now I'm going to get further into it. And then you read in, and then something just triggers it, and just sit and stare out the window, and then I start writing instead or whatever, because it triggers something. So I always have it in my mind, and the easiest way to kind of say it is that I feel like I am in a dialogue with the book.
Yeah.
And I can pause the conversation whenever I want, but I pause and then I can think. I can think it while I'm reading, but if my thoughts and my response to what's happening in the book becomes too complex, then I can stop and I can take notes, I can adjust it, I can read the sentence or the page several times to go, what is it here that really is resonating? And then I underline, and I might have underlined it already, but then I read it again and I go, actually, I need to underline here too, and this needs to, I write a note on the side, because I'm now having a learned, deep conversation with somebody who have, by the time this book came out, this guy has lived a long life. He's a teacher on the university level, and he has many great thoughts. He has sat down and put hundreds of hours, thousands of hours into this thing. So I'm having a conversation with somebody who's really crafted their arguments and everything. Not all of it resonates with me, and they don't have so many underlinings, because I'm going, this doesn't have, or whatever, or is this just a story? I'm going, what's the point of this, or whatever? This story I'm not going to use for anything. Or so then you just listen to it for 10 pages, and all of a sudden it comes into something. Oh, now he's talking about that thing which is relevant to my dinosaur show, or
right,
whatever.
Right. And well, I have two main questions. One's mundane, and one's a little bit maybe more fun, but they're kind of equally big. So maybe the more fun question is like, how in the world did you ever come up with this system? Was this something you've always done since you were a kid, or is this something that developed over time to more and more level of depth in terms of like, you know, the kind of symbolism of a small line to a bigger line to a folding the page? Like, yeah, is this something you've done your whole life, or is this something you've developed and worked deeply?
No, it's something that I've done since I was very young. Now that I moved home to Norway and I looked in books, I read them.
Right.
I am writing in books then as well. So so
this is the way you've kind of interacted with the world since you were young.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's also like when you go to a Steiner school or a Waldorf school, you take notes. So you don't have a textbook. The teacher's standing up and they are talking about the subject. So when we then had about evolution, one of the things that really sparked an interest in me, I was taking notes. And then once I've taken those notes, I transfer those notes, write it out into long sentences and add in and write it into another book. And that book then become the thing that I gotta study up before we do the test in the end. And then you gotta illustrate it, and there's gotta be poetry in there, and there's gotta be drawings and all of that. So 12 years of that process. I mean, it's not quite like that when you do first, second, fourth grade, but it goes towards that. Yeah. So the transition of going from the last year 10, 11, 12 in my school and going to the university, there was no difference really in stepping into this other thing of getting a lecture before, taking notes. And I had some of these shorthand things that just a letter means a word, and I know what it is. If it's a capital M, then it means human being and stuff, because menneske in Norwegian, or whatever. There's things that I go, so I can see that in the old things too, that note-taking techniques from... And the fact that I then was always taking notes, and then I had to take those notes and then write it into a book that I was going to read and that I was going to be judged on, because reading, they don't judge you with characters, but they write and they see from having spoken to you every day and been in the classroom and seeing your notes. They might look over your notes, and then they also look over how you've transformed your notes into what you read there. So they see how you have... What have you caught up? What do you find important in what you said? And this led to it being commonly, like even in mathematics, and going, it wasn't my strongest subject or whatever, but I did all right, and I inched my way up to a higher grade because I understood the philosophical aspects related to mathematics, which is more prevalent as a thing within the kind of Steiner school. The Steiner teachers, they often see, if you're doing mathematics, they love Fibonacci, and they love how this is actually connected to the real world, and it's not just an abstract thing. And those things I could sometimes grasp much deeper, even if I couldn't do... I could do it, but only not virtuosically. Then I could understand the other things, and you could get extra grades for the holistic approach to it. So I have always had this kind of... So maybe that training has had something to do with it. To synthesize it and to get it in. And this to me is also then connected to the way that I feel like, where I go, a showman can also be a writer. who puts all of this work into a story or all of this work into a brilliant essay where you are, and that is meant for somebody to read. It has a beginning and a middle and an end, and it is for one person to... He could potentially read it out loud, but the book is then like an abstract way. He gives you his 200 hours worth of work for you to turn around and read it, and then it has an effect on you like that. So that's also sort of shaped it. And when I'm writing my notes over, it's for somebody else to read and for me to actually get the information from it.
I mean, that's amazing. So to uncover that trace from the past, I mean, I can really see that concretely. But the other big question is, again, it's more mundane than that. That was an incredible story.
But I think some of it also comes from, just to kind of blow that out there, to go, this is also the thing that fascinates me with Rudolf Steiner. It is that you can just dig into beekeeping, or you can dig into movement, or you can dig into oration, or you can dig into mathematics, or you can dig into Buddhism or into esoteric medieval Christianity, and he has said something about it, and they are all kind of connected.
Right.
So having grown up with that, and then I got sort of interested in why is it that this place is like that, and then I lived on this farm for 6 months, because when you're in school they don't teach you about Steiner. So I learned most of that stuff afterwards, and also I started reading some while I was still in school, to kind of work out what is this thing that I have been in for 14 years.
Yeah.
Where does it come from? Why is the stuff like this? And they are reluctant to tell you, because it's not the school that teaches you about the works of Steiner or whatever. Like it's that's underlying it, but that's not what they're talking about.
I see.
So and to be with to have met these people who are inspired by him, like more than Steiner himself, but then feeling this thing where people go, always think that there's something more to it. It's not just maths. It's not just this. It's connected to, you need to take these things and you need to work with them artistically. That's how they get inside you, and you really understand what the numbers are and how it connects together. This is like, it's not just a thing in itself. Mathematics is not just numbers on the page. They are connected to the thing, and projective geometry can be an incredible philosophical exploration of how the point of view changes when you have a reflection on a sphere, for example, for instance, or whatever. Like this. So to be amongst people who do think that everything is connected, or that there is depth to everything, has made me being able to put that onto performance and entertainment. And I know it's there. And in a way, this book, The Way of the Showman, and this season of things, is the season or the book that I would have wanted to read.
Yeah.
I would have liked that there was a book out there that made all of these connections, but there isn't anything out there. So when people go, where are the books that tells me about this Way of the Showman? It's the kind of stuff where they get inspiration. I'm going like, well, it's this book on curiosity here, and it's I had a conversation when I read this book on evolution over here, and then I read this book on art history, and then I watched a lecture series of a guy from Utah University about prehistoric art, and then this guy, I get this great idea here, so it comes from sources not readily available. So then those few things that are out there, whether it's like the Zen of juggling, or the Zen stories in Charlie Dancy's Encyclopedia of Ball Juggling, or those kind of things that have these little snippets of meaning, and then the history of the fool and the history of clowns, and from shaman to superstar, the Death and Resurrection show by Robin Taylor.
Wow.
It's like, where you go, these are some few books that I can hold up and go, oh, Magic and Meaning by Eugene Berger, and what's his name, Richard Neal, what's his name, I can't remember his first name. Anyway, books where they go, okay, this is digging into some of that depth, but I don't have any direct source book to go, oh, this is this, so
I get you. Well, so I can kind of understand like where these habits come from, or these interests and this kind of method that you have. I mean, when you're a student, I can envision that life and that lifestyle, and also into university, I can imagine that. But now you're a professional performer, you have a career, you have a really busy career, you have a family, you have a daughter, you have a wife. So the question that's maybe mundane in one way is just because that was an amazing, kind of understanding of the whole bigger picture. Now I'm kind of curious about the very fine details. So when you go through these books like this and you dog-ear the corner of the page and you underline and highlight and write notes in the margins, I understand that you have different projects in your life, you're writing different sorts of shows, and when these next 2 weeks I'm going to focus on this idea here, my pirate show or dinosaur show, whatever you're working on, then you kind of have this pool of resource material that you're just kind of generally gather in your life.
Yeah.
But my question is, like, I'm looking at this book in front of me, man. First of all, it's a pretty big book, but there's a lot of pages dog-eared. I mean, a lot. And there's a lot of notes in the margin, and there's a lot of highlights in there. And the question is,
and then something is particular here, and that's got a green sticky note.
Yeah, there's a green sticky note even.
Because that talks about depth.
When do you...
I need to get to that.
When do you go back? Like, how do you have time? So the question is, like, how do you have time? When do you go back and, like, kind of engage all of that information that triggered something in you, and then more practically connect it to that idea of, like, how in the world do you have time, Frodo? Is then how do you... how does this work its way into the performing stuff, like concretely? I mean, I get it conceptually.
Yeah. So this stuff that's going on here now is because I am doing a project on writing on play, and this is specifically talking about that, and then it's talking about education.
So when will you go back to look at this again, though?
So currently, I brought this book and everything, and I was reading these things just before I. Because it is about play, and I'm writing that currently.
Yeah.
And my wife and daughter went back to Norway, so I was going to write now full time, and then it turns out that you're here, so now I'm. But I woke up this morning and I wrote until it's. But does 3 minutes until I had to go. And I went down and I wrote in the in between the acts, and I wrote in between the shows.
But when you're writing, do you have this book actively in your hand?
No. So what has kind of happened now is that I have had planned to write about a play for quite a while, and I have read a lot about it, read really deeply about it, and then for a period I could not synthesize what it was that I actually wanted to say, because there's too many different books and too many voices and too many things that I liked and that are important. So now...
So you took some distance from...
So I just needed to start to write.
I see.
To actually get something out, to go to see what it was. Then I wrote a whole bunch, and I had already written some notes, like in the very first draft of the book, because this was always thought of as the end, even though I now see that maybe this could be the beginning of something else, because it's kind of changing gears right towards the end of the book. But
I get you.
But then I wrote it out, and then I wrote a bunch of stuff, and then realized that the stuff that I'd written before is partly covering some of the stuff that I've already written. So then I wrote a synopsis, and I found a synopsis in my notes on my phone that I looked at again. And I gone, yep, so this is okay. I've had some of these ideas that I just rewrote in the synopsis. I found it again. I gone, the main structure of this is still the same. I just forgotten that I've written a synopsis at another time. So then I have thousands of words, 15,000 words notes on my phone.
Wow.
Which is notes that I've written, text that I've copied out, because I use a lot of reading apps, and I can copy the text out and stick it in, and then I put 3 quotation marks on it if I've copied it out, because sometimes it's indistinguishable what it is that I've copied and what I've written myself. So I have a system of notation to go, can't put that directly into the thing, because you're going, this is an idea that I've gone. It might be like, so it's like 10 lines or whatever, or like it becomes lots on the phone because they're so skinny. And it's like you take 5 lines in here and it becomes a long sort of thing, and then you read it and I'm going like, did I write this? And most of the time I can tell when I wrote it or not, but every now and then I go like, where did this come from? And I think that I've written it or whatever. And sometimes I take the whole phrase and put it into Google just to check that I actually didn't copy this from somewhere or whatever. But
so now
do I go and read this again?
And just to make sure I understand. So when you're writing this now we're using the phone notes. I get it. So now the phone notes have come into the process already, and that's kind of active.
Phone notes goes in because you can airdrop that, and it puts it into the notes app on the phone, and I have the words open in Pages on and then I copy the chunks in, and in the beginning I
Gotcha.
usually do that first, because now there's notes all over the shop, so I take them in, and then I start to just put over, this is important, and that goes before that, and that goes after that, and then I just look through all of the notes, and you start to read it, and that ends up being just this sort of block of thousands of words down the bottom, and I take them and start pasting them up at the top as I'm writing, or going, this is here, and then connected with a synopsis or whatever. And then with the books and stuff, then sometimes I will go back, like I'm about to go back to this other book that I read, which is actually kind of one of the most that has the biggest scope, and that's a book on evolution. It's a book on religion in human evolution by a guy called Robert Bellah, which is an incredible book. And I realized that when I came into this, and I was reading all sorts of stuff, and I had read this book by Stuart Brown on play and brain development or whatever, and I thought, that's a great and I thought that some of my stuff came from there, and then I thought that some of it came from this other place, and I couldn't go, where do I have these things, this thing of relaxed field, where does that thing come from? And that's been in my life for a long time, of how I think of it. And then all of a sudden I look in this book of religion for something else, because I found a guy online that had written a blog post about this, a guy that I follow for other reasons. And all of a sudden he goes, it's like, in Robert Bellah's monumental, epic 700-page thing of he's like an important guy in sociology, like the whole thing, it pivots on an axle of play. And I go, does it? Because I read that book, but it was in 2010. And I remember certain things from it, but I didn't remember that's what it... And then I read his article, and then I went and I looked at the book, and the book is... because I had it on Kindle, so I still have it carrying in my phone. So I go and click it in, and then that remembers all of your highlights. So I can go in and I can click on the highlights, and there it's just like all about play. And I see that my idea of what play is, and the importance of play, as the springboard for culture and for religion and all this, I go, this comes from this book, but in the... So that was in 2010 when we were in Paris or something like that. And then I was going like, so that's 12 years ago or whatever now. And I couldn't remember, but I had synthesized these ideas into my own thought. I have thought of play for a long time, and I have notes from wanting to do a whole blog post in 2012 on my blog, but never actually, it never eventuated. It was just in notes on the blog. So I've been thinking about this, but the core, so it's basically his narrative of how it goes from play into the other things. So that and then I went back into that book, and I found it's like I have huge amounts of notes in here, and I just go in and just look at the notes. I just read the notes of, so like with the highlight bits, they get put in a separate section Kindle. So I just read all of those, and then I just go.
Will you kind of go? This process is incredible. Will you kind of, when you finish this, I don't know whatever, some sort of draft of your writing, will you kind of make a tour of all your books on the subject to see if you left any ideas out?
Often, yeah.
Cool.
So I go because then by the time I have already, because the hardest thing is to write the draft. Every now and then you get into a flow, and it comes out, and I'm writing like 2,000 words, and it's like all good, and then you got to go back and reshuffle a little bit. But the hardest thing is to create that whole structure and the whole story of exactly what it is that you want to say. Because if I have to say something about play, it needs to be directly related to how this fits into showmanship. That's why I'm writing it here. I'm not just telling people about play. I'm positing that the what I'm writing is called play as the origins of showmanship. So that's part of that core idea. And
no, I get it. What a great process. I mean, what a crazy process and great process. And we could potentially stop this here, but I'm going to say one more thing that you can share, or you can edit this out. But I think it's like a wrapping up, maybe a little bit of a conclusion. Because I actually had called Eric today, and I said, hey, I'm going to record with Frodo tonight. Like, any questions you want me to ask him? And he said, yeah, ask Frodo about how he incorporates all of his kind of curiosity about the world into his process of creating things. And that's what we just talked about. And I just want to say, in your answer now of talking about answering that question, I now have a third example. I have a third example of something that I really a fun thing I really discovered about life as I got older. And that is, I guess I'm of a certain age where I can start to have thoughts like this, which is, you're the third example now. This process of yours is the third example. I'll tell the other two examples and then tell you the idea. But the first example is that I'm obsessed with the Cirque du Soleil show Mystère in Las Vegas. I've seen it 76 times. And the show's been running for, now 29 years officially, but we can, round it up to 30 years. And I think this show started much of what we understand as contemporary circus today, or new circus, or whatever you want to say. And that's a whole other conversation to record one day. But here's the thing. The first time I saw that show, when it opened in 1993, I couldn't understand. I literally couldn't understand what I was seeing. And that's not hyperbole. That's literal. I'm watching stuff happening and I can't even I can't tell you what I saw because my brain could not understand. It could not comprehend what was happening. Some trivial, seemingly trivial examples now. Performers were walking in the audience, Frodo. They were not on stage. I mean, I was, whatever. I was 16. It didn't compute. I was like, this is insane. How is this happening? So the show, in Mystère, of course, the joke is, it's mystery. Whatever the word for mystery or whatever it is. The show was a mystery to me. And it took on this mythical kind of almost religious place in my life. I think of it, when I've seen the show 76 times, I call it going to church. Yeah. I'm going to go see it 3 more times in 2 weeks from now. I'm going to fly to Vegas. I'm going to see it 3 times on the trip. And it's like going to church. I'm home when I'm there, spiritually. I don't know, mentally. There's something about seeing that show over the span of the past 30 years. It's imprinted in me. To the point where I watched, I did it with Nouvelle Experience first, and I did it with Mystère after. But first with Nouvelle Experience, I watched the VHS tape for 1 year, every day for 1 year. I would come home from school, and the first thing I did was press play and watch Nouvelle Experience every day for a year. And then I did it later on with Mystère. Pat McGuire, who was in the Micro Motion piece, which is the best piece of juggling I've seen in my life, which was in that show. He got me a secret videotape from the tech booth, super illegal, underground, whatever. And I played that tape every day for a year. So what I'm getting to on the Mystère thing is, now, 30 years later, I'm friends with the performers. Yeah. I've been backstage there. I've seen rehearsals. I've seen trainings. I've performed on that stage. We did a late night cabaret one year. I was on that stage doing my act. And so I've started to learn. I know all the performers there. I know all the people. Nowadays, you follow them on Instagram and on Facebook. They're humans. They're not mysteries anymore. And the cool thing now that I'm older or old enough is that the mystery of Mystère, in one way, to me, is in one way gone, right? I've uncovered. I know the shape of the theater. I know what the backstage looks like. And I know I've had lunch with the main character, right? It's not a complete unknown thing. They're humans to me now. And I thought at first that would destroy my obsession with the show, that I would destroy all the magic, because the thing that burned it so much into my mind was that I couldn't understand it. And now I understand it so much better than, I could ever hope to or have thought I would. But the thing that has happened through that process is I've only grown to love it more. Because what I understood is the show is not a mystery. The show is not some alternate dimension. It's not some unattainable, crazy, wacky from outer space thing. It's human. It's me and you. That blows my mind even more, that these people who had the same chance that I had made that show. Do you know what I mean? That we are here now today living our lives like this, and at one point a group of people decided to live their lives like that. Yeah. And that the deeper I know the show, the more details I know about the show, the even more impressive it becomes, the more legendary it becomes, because it's not by some unobtainable magic power that show exists. I can point to the nuts and bolts of the choreography of the opening sequence, of why that works, and when the stage lowers, and when the the cow comes out, and when this other character comes out, and I know the names of all the singers, and I know the songs, and it only makes the show better and deeper and even just more crazy because I had the same chance that Franco Dragon had. Like, we're all human, is what I mean. So the second example is Michael Motion. So he's my favorite juggler, and I had this project which I completed a year or two ago, where I interviewed every single person Michael Motion ever worked with. And again, you could say, well, through hearing these stories of his, humanity on all different sorts of levels and uncovering all the little details around the work. I mean, it was a lot of people, Frodo. I mean, I have, 50, 60 hours of interviews recorded and notes and whatever, right? It's only made me even more in awe of Michael Motion because he's just a dude. He's just a person. He's like me and you, but he made the triangle.
He made a triangle, and he made a genre of juggling in contact juggling, or like it just.
It's just crazy. It's just crazy. Yeah. Like before I did that project with Michael Motion, I was thinking honestly, I was like, well, Michael was on a different level. He's a different level of human, or he's a different level of juggler, let's say. Like, Michael was just working on a different level than all of us. He's not like us, man. He's not like me and you. I interviewed these people, Frodo. He is like me and you. That's the crazy thing. He's like me and you, but he still made the crystal balls. Because he isn't different than us. His process is not different than ours. He's in a room with a bunch of objects, hanging out. He had he has a daughter, right? He used to be married. He's just like us, but he still made the crystal balls. That's even crazy. Like this perspective I have now in my 40s, I'm like, wow. That's even cooler. That's even cooler than Michael Motion being like some sort of special genius that we can't touch, right? It's even cooler that
it's that myth of the lone genius who just goes into a room and comes out and something incredible comes and nobody knows how it happened. It came out and it was fully formed. But then the more you talk to everybody,
it's even cooler.
It was built up like this and it failed like that and they tried this as well and that didn't work, and then you go and then through all of that managed to find
it still
this
existed,
thing,
and so now I got that third example. I got Mystere, I got Michael Motion, and now I got you for your process. No, but seriously, man, your process of how you experience the world with this active, like you say, engagement of the information around you, and the way you pull that in. Because what I loved about your story is exactly drilling down to this, like, in one way, I don't say mundane or trivial, but like this everyday thing of like, I went to school in a Steiner school, and in that culture, we take notes like this and we learn information like this, and I can follow your path. Again, it's not like, when I talked to Eric today, hey, what should I ask Frodo? And then Eric's like, yeah, ask Frodo like how he, this question. And I'm like, oh yeah, I want to know that too. Because for me and Eric, it's a mystery. Right? Like, we're just like, I don't see how that works. And now you just broke it down for me in black and white.
In general, and then you can talk specifically about specific acts or specific things that I've created. But the thing is, you can get more details.
But I went to school too. Yeah. I went to school in Ohio. I went to university for a couple years and quit, whatever. And like, I didn't do this, but you did. And I think it's so amazing to know that your process was human. And I'm not saying it's any less incredible, but it's simple. It's understandable. It's relatable. I get it. The book's in front of me. I can see it. I can see your notes and stuff. And yet, I mean, it's just incredible what you've done with that process, man. It's just, it blows my mind. But it blows my mind because I understand it very fully. And I think that's so cool. So I learned two really great things about you. One yesterday and one today. Today I learned about your process, about how you incorporate all your interests into your life and into your work. That's crazy. That was amazing. And the thing I learned yesterday was this idea that you were the act doctor. And I knew that you had kind of worked here and there in La Soiree with Brett Haylock and whoever else, or whatever the names are. I mess them up. But that you had all those years of experience leading up to some sort of, I don't know, epiphany, but some sort of new phase of your life, of your work.
You also pulled that out of me, because I hadn't actually thought that through. Because
but it makes sense
that
now.
I started to
Makes
write
sense
that
now.
blog right about the time that my daughter was born and all that. I hadn't made those connections before either. That I started to synthesize all this stuff at that time.
It makes sense though, right? Because you had that experience of like, oh, can you, oh, this person's got to come into the show. Can you kind of help him out, Frodo? Because like you said, Brett couldn't quite articulate. You had to be that translator. And in you being that translator for all those years.
Also, just when you want to talk to somebody, you need to talk to, when you're talking to an artist, that artist need to trust the person who's coming to say something. And you are sometimes people are nervous going like, is this the producer that's saying this?
Yeah.
Or are you saying this to me?
Am I going to get fired?
Like, yeah. And you'd be honest and going, well, it's like...
But I think it helps you. I mean, I see it as this way of like you developing your consciousness about these things because you were put in that position to be the person who, in one way, knows those things or can at least articulate those things. And then through having to articulate those things, they go around in your brain. And then that's when it starts to become conscious and not just intuitive. So you had all that kind of like undercover training in one way. And again, it doesn't make it less cool. I don't go, oh, well, of course, Frodo has a great... act or process because, you know, Brett Haylock just made him do all this extra practice that I didn't get to have in my life. I don't think it diminishes what you do. I think it's even more cool that I understand you are not a mysterious anomaly. You're not a, you know what I mean? Like you're a knowable person and your process is knowable.
And that.
But your process is knowable.
Yeah.
And that makes it even cooler to understand what you've done with those opportunities. Yeah. I mean, that's awesome, man.
And I have learned about you. You have the capacity to pull through with your obsession that we spoke a bunch about when we did Reflex. Did never actually manage to fully integrate obsession as a theme into that show, but it was something we spoke about. Yeah. And your ability to pursue through, like to go, I did this project and I was interviewed every person that that Michael Motion has worked with. That's an insane kind of thing. And then and also then like your obsession with Cirque that we've talked a bunch about today, more than we've ever talked or whatever. And that's also like it's to get into something on that kind of level, because I truly also think that you can have transcendental experiences through art as well. And I get it through Bach. I listen to music and then it's like it moves me to tears, and I can listen to songs also.
It's just cool. Nausea. It's just cool when I was younger and I look at these monumental, things or figures in my life or whatever, however you want to experiences in my life, and I just go like, oh yeah, that's not in one way connected to me. It's not relevant to me. It's because it's not in my world. I'm from Ohio.
Yeah.
I'm not saying again it's like a self-esteem issue, but it's like you go see Mystere the first time and it's in a it's the first custom built theater in the Strip for a Soleil show, right? A residence show. Or even you go see it next week and it's been running almost 30 years. Can you imagine you created that show in 30 years? And you just go like, that's not the world I live in. But suddenly you realize it is the world I live in. And for me, that's an inspiring thought. It's an inspiring thought to say, I'm in no way comparing myself to Michael Motion, but we're both human beings. And I go, I have the same opportunities he has to make work. Wow, that's powerful. It goes back to, maybe we can just sum that up and say, when I was 8 years old, you can't just juggle. It would have been so much cooler to be like, hey, Jay, Michael Motion started off doing 3 balls as well. Right? Yeah. And then go, wait, what? He did? He wasn't, he didn't just start out up here on top.
Yeah.
He had a human journey of struggles and failures and risk and successes. And
he might have had a spangly bow tie as well at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So I think, that's kind of a nice maybe place to wrap it up and say like we should, just have that thought about like, that we're on.
Yeah, and then you just go, and it's like, in a way, he could just juggle. But no one can just juggle because on the way that we were saying before, as soon as you make any statement about anything, then that thing is less than what it is. Because even when you are just juggling, there is so much more going on at the same time.
Yeah. There you go.
You are there, you're in the space, you're like, oh, let's not even talk about what it is, but it's always more than, and it's not either or, it's as well as.
Yeah. Great, man. All right, well, I'm going to go to sleep.
Oh, yeah. I see there are 2 donuts here, though.
Those are for you.
Maybe we'll knock them out before we go.
All right. Hey, man, I'll talk to you again.
What a pleasure.
See ya.
Soon.
Bye.
Bye. Yep, there goes the end of that conversation. What a wonderful journey it is. I always enjoy talking to that guy, Mr. Jay Gilligan, ladies and gentlemen. So, that's all we have to say for today. But if you would like to buy a t-shirt, go to the show notes and click on it. Get yourself a sweet hoodie. You can look amazing in the coming summer or winter or whenever it is that you listen to this. And you can sport this incredible logo. You can see the triangle eye, you can see the circus tent, you know by listening, or if you haven't heard it already, you can go back and listen to the in-depth metaphorical connections that I make to the triangle, to the eye, to the circus tent, and maybe I will do a whole episode just based on the symbology of the logo, so that you can have some pithy things to think about. Anyway, get yourself a hoodie or a t-shirt. Tell some people about this podcast, that we exist. I would certainly love it. And if you want to buy me a virtual coffee, you can do that at buymeacoffee.com/Captain Frodo. And you can find me on social media as Frodo Santini or as Captain Frodo. It's been a pleasure. It's been such a pleasure talking to you and talking to Jay. But until next time, all that's left to say is take care of yourself and those you love, and I hope to see you along the way.